and we will record this. And so the recording will be available at some point if folks are interested, and also a transcript will be available too. So for things that pop up into the chat box, links and such, you can get that information later. I'll just maybe ask you for your email address before we end here. So welcome everybody. For those of you, I know there's a lot of familiar people there, but for those of you who I don't know, I'm Michael Banning, and I'm the visiting faculty on the MFA program right now. And this professional practice seminar is part of a series that we do every semester now. So we have probably 5 to 10 of these events each semester. So I'm really happy that we were able to do this one that focuses on tabling at comic and illustration events. And we have some guests here with us, guest panelists. So I'm going to introduce you all here. So welcome to, and tell me if I pronounce your names correctly too, Rai Macarayan?
Yeah, Rai Macarayan.
Macarayan.
Yeah.
They, them, theirs. Rai is a freelance illustrator and designer from Hawaii, currently based in Minneapolis. They previously worked as an in-house textile designer for Target, and they have showcased illustration and zine work at shows such as Autoptic Cake, which is the Chicago Alternative Comics Festival, and VanCaf, Vancouver Comics Art Festival. So welcome, Rai. And Kyle Harabedian is here. Kyle's a comic artist, illustrator, and publisher. He's received his MFA from MCAD in 2013. And his work has been featured in publications such as Rock Ink Roll, Adventures in Comics, Split Lip, and New Faith to New World. In 2015, Kyle began publishing the comic anthology series Campfire Comics and Stories with Dennis Madamba. Kyle is also a member of the board of the Autoptic Festival of Comic Art. So welcome, Kyle. Nice to see you. And Dennis. Dennis Madamba is with us. Is a Filipino-American illustrator, visual artist, and a teacher of graphic design at Augsburg University. He attended the MFA program at MCAD from 2012 to 2014. And Dennis co-publishes the comics anthology Campfire Comics and Stories with Kyle. So welcome, Dennis. Yeah, great you could all join us today. So we had talked among the 4 of us about a format here, and I have some kind of preset questions that we're going to play with, and I will actually paste these into the chat in just a second once we get going, just so you kind of know what we're going to cover. And if you have other things that you want to get into, anybody, feel free to paste into the chat or just speak up, but we'll kind of go through these things somewhat in order, and then we can open it up for question and answer, or feel free to jump in at any time with that. It's a small enough and group here that we can just kind of have a conversation. So first kind of question or topic here is just about the comics and illustration conventions in general. Can you just maybe tell us a little about what the comics, and maybe we're speaking to a audience that knows this already, but a little bit about what the conventions are for and what they're like. Also, since this is geared towards illustrators and comics, is there a difference between those two, and how people access those conventions?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, that's great.
I think the conventions are for creators to meet the public, to meet their audience, and for people to for artists to sell their work directly to the public, promote their work and build an audience. And I think for illustrators, it's the same as for comic artists. It's a way to sell your work, and put it out there. And I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly what they are for. There's a lot of shows that kind of have an overlap between comics and illustration. I think there are some that are maybe more illustration heavy, more comics heavy. But for the most part, I think a lot of the people selling are probably selling similar things, similar items, because it's never really just one thing. Unless you're like a publisher tabling, then you're probably only selling books. But for the most part, it's creators selling like a multitude of their own self-published or self-made products.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting because when we were setting this up, I kind of asked, well, are you a comic artist or an illustrator? And everybody was kind of doing both, so makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that going off of both of Kyle and Rye's answers, like it can depend also on the show itself. Like there's a lot of like shows that are really heavy or that like ask you to do more comics versus just print and illustrations, like single page illustrations. And then like there are like the zine fests that where folks can have publications that are all text or you know, photography or made up of, you know, different kinds of art forms. So yeah, so it can be like kind of a range as well. And kind of, yeah, obviously we can talk more about it, but like have a fit, like you find your fit within those shows, like within that range.
Mhm.
How many events do you all kind of participate in, you know, in a, say, a year? Are you doing like many of these or a couple?
Yeah, I think, what did we do last year? Maybe 4?
Like 4 maybe?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Um,
What are some of the main ones that you participate in? You know, I guess maybe for people here, you know, some that are in the area, regional and local ones, but also sort of some of the bigger ones that you try to get into. And maybe if people could type, if Kyle, Ryan, Dennis, just as we're talking, could type some of those into the chat, that'd be great because
sure, I can
we can access them later.
Okay.
if you guys want
Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
to. So there's the MSP SpringCon and the FallCon. Those are sort of the ones that have been sort of long standing. So I'll put those in there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on the Autoptic board, planning the Autoptic Festival, which is it's every other year, and it's kind of an independent small press show that started, I think, 2013, 2014, and it's fairly recent. There are zine fests, the Twin Cities Zine Fest. As Dennis said, it's sort of a small press kind of thing. Just trying to figure out how to. So topic. We can talk more about that. There's also a couple of shows I don't know too much about. There's one called Metacon, and there's one I found called Anna Minneapolis, which seems to focus more on like Japanese pop culture and anime. So there's like a variety of different audiences and different fandoms and different publics that you would have access to at these different shows. And like Dennis said, you want to find a good fit for your work. And
yeah. I have a couple to list off as
sure.
well. Just kind of going back to what we were talking about before too, I think like branching out from just like comics and zine shows, there are some that are like, I think there are illustration shows that even kind of bleed into like craft fair shows. And so one, Kyle already mentioned like Twin Cities Zine Fest. Queer Bazaar is one that happens kind of around the holidays, which is like surrounded for and made for like the queer creating community, but is like pottery, illustration, zines, like all of that. And then there's also Support Local Hustle, which is pretty new. I think has kind of been initiated in the last year, and it is specifically for like BIPOC creators. It has zines, it has illustration, it lets people also like sell their hand bottled kimchi, which is pretty cool. So yeah, and that again, we can go into more of that conversation of like what a show can really contain, but those are some other local ones.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for listing those. And so I'm assuming most of those have websites and you can kind of access information about them.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about how one, gains access to have a table? Do you apply? Is it juried, or there are different kind of formats of that, and your experience with that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a lot of different, each show seems to have a different process of doing it. Usually there's an online application, and then very often there's a jury process. Um, Sometimes there's a lottery,
Mhm.
or some other process and so you just sort of follow the process for each show. And with SpringCon and FallCon, I think the first time I applied online, and then they sent me a postcard in the mail. It was a sort of combination of things that happened. And some shows they'll have a waiting list, and sometimes you're on the waiting list, but someone drops out, and then you would get in.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the process. Sometimes it's good to have everything ready to go. So when you apply, you have all the information ready, and you just plug it into their applications, and sometimes you don't get in, but it's still worth trying and seeing what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I would say the wait list is a pretty common thing among shows,
Mhm.
which is kind of cool because it gives you the prospect of potentially getting in if someone can't show up or any other thing. So there's usually no harm in applying really because it's either you get in, it's a no, or you're on the wait list. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of applications are like online. I think a lot of them are like a Google Doc, and you would pop in your social, your website, examples of your work. And some shows, again, will kind of depend more on like what they're looking for, more than anything. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like more of the applications are accepting like multiple kinds of examples. So like like
Yeah.
not just your website, right? Like you can use a Tumblr or just like a place where your photos are. But it always seems
Mhm.
like it's important to have that space where you have like pictures of your product itself. So
Yeah.
um, like it seems like maybe for like I'm mostly an illustrator, so like a lot of my work on my website is just like JPEGs of digital files, right? But having like the picture of the book or the picture of the patch itself, like in physical space, it'd
Yeah.
be good to
Oh,
show what you're making,
Yeah, definitely.
that's a great tip. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so what I'm hearing, it seems like this can be fairly competitive to get into the conventions.
Mhm.
I think it can be, yeah.
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 Mhm.
I think it can be, especially depending on how any of them are like juried. I think for example, TCAF, which is the Toronto Comics and Art Festival, I think they're juried, but in particular, they only let people who have tabled in a certain year. They're not allowed to table until 2 years after that. So it's every other. That kind of really like diversifies the pool. Um,
Right.
yeah, and then there are others where it's like first come, first serve, which is like you have to really have your finger on the tab for those. But yeah, they can be competitive. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think also there are certain ones that seem to prioritize like diversity or
Mhm.
showing new artists, and that can be cool to look out for those. So if you haven't really tabled at a lot of places, maybe like the Zine Fest seem to take priority for newer folks, and then like I was at Short Run, and they, on their application, they asked for low income. Are you a low income artist or a BIPOC artist? And so, yeah, so it can be good to see which ones are asking those questions, just because it seems like they're, prioritizing those things to bring folks to it.
Yeah.
Maybe that answers this question. We have a question in the chat here, which is from Aurora. How do you find your fit of your type of convention? And if it's just trial and error, how do you know which to try first and might be the best to try? Any recommendations for kind of like foot in the door conventions?
Yeah.
I would say you might want to try local first, something that you don't have to travel for, or travel too far, because it can cost, there can be a cost associated with the travel and accommodations, and so something local would be good to start, something small, and see if you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And so what are some of the, Harry's saying Twin Cities Zine Fest is a great early convention to do as a suggestion as well. Thanks, Harry. And what are some of the kind of like coveted conventions that you really, strive to get into, like on a national or international level?
I think TCAF is one of them. Like that seems like a really it's like a huge one. So that's Toronto Comic Arts Festival. Comic, the ones that, well, what else? I guess Short Run seems to be a pretty good one.
SPX is a really big one. Yeah. Emerald City Comic Con is another really big one. As far as like, again, more in the direction of like craft and illustration, Renegade Craft Fair is a big one. And they have a few like spread out around the country. So like their own like local boards will host. What others are there? I mean, if you want to get really big, like San Diego Comic Con is one. But yeah.
There's Cake in Chicago.
Oh yeah, Cake for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Cake.
Okay.
All these things that have unfortunately been canceled this summer.
Yeah. Horrible.
I know.
And so
I guess.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say Mocha Fest in
oh yeah.
New York. Yeah, like especially for illustrators, I guess. But I mean like comic artists too. But that's like a Society of Illustrators associated festival. So I think that one's like hard to get into. So
I think that one's hard to get into, and also, and this is something we can talk about, I guess now, is that like some applications, or if you get into a show, there are often table fees. So some are more accessible than others, and some will like run you more money than others. So like a small local zine fest, like Twin Cities Zine Fest, I think the table fee is like what, $60?
Yeah.
Whereas for Mocha, their table fee I know is like $300.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to consider. But I know people who have been able to, like, particularly students who have been able to like, pitch that and like be able to like get the like funding to be able to attend those shows. So yeah, there's usually some way to kind of access it, but for the most part, like table fees are another thing to consider if you're going to apply to a show.
Great. We had a question in the chat here about wondering if any of you do art fairs, or if you like kind of a comparison between art fairs and the comic conventions. I don't know if that's from an illustrator, perhaps. I'm not sure, but
I mean, I think they're similar.
Yeah, I think they're similar. It's really, I think, dependent just on the crowd and the type of things that you'd be selling. Like, I don't see why there's any reason why you couldn't sell a zine at like an art fair. But I feel like if people are thinking about going to art fair, they're thinking more of like handmade crafts
Right.
or something like that. So there's just like different subsections of what like a tabling show is for the most part, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, great. And before we move on into sort of best practices and tips when you are actually tabling, any things that you would say to like avoid, any opportunities that you've run across that are ones that, maybe aren't worth the while? I'm not, not trying to call out anybody and give them a real negative spin, more just sort of like, if there's any scams out there.
I think well, Kyle and I were talking about this the other day, and I think like historically we haven't done very well at the Comic-Con or Spring Cons, like with what we make. So I don't know, it kind of goes back to just like finding the fit of what you make. I found like, I don't know, we've talked about like maybe if we had more like pop culture or something to do, or fan art maybe that related to more that the stuff at Comic-Con, it would do a little better. So but on the other end, like at Short Run and like Zine Fest, it was a lot better. Like we did a lot better. So I don't know, I think it goes back to finding your fit for sure. Not to say that Comic-Con or SpringCon or FallCon are bad at all. It's like it wasn't for us, I think.
Well,
yeah, like that's a different crowd.
Yeah. But I mean, at that show, they don't charge a table fee, right? So they and they feed us. So it's still maybe worth it to try to do it. But yeah, we didn't sell anything at that show.
Oh no.
We have another question here, and maybe it's a good segue into kind of the next section about talking about, when you're actually tabling and how you set things up and what you take. The question here is, how do you really start to get products and zines together for conventions, and how do you find the expenses to get products together for the tables, as well as decide on which products you bring of your works to sell?
I like to bring a little bit more than we think we'll need. You can always bring a little extra and hopefully sell out, or you sell and then you bring out the new stuff, or
I think the nice thing about particularly like smaller independent zine fests is that the joy of it is that a lot of the things that people have on the table are like literally stapled together pieces of paper. So in that way, like to get into it, you just make zines. You just like find a printer and you print stuff out and you create a little booklet and then you sell it for like $2. As far as like finding the expenses to get products together, or like how you decide which products you bring, I would say like depending on the convention, like 2 or 3 zines are usually what a lot of people have on their table. Or at least I guess this is in my experience. I'll have like 2 or 3 zines, like 3 or 4 prints, and then some other stuff that I've made, like pins or patches or stickers, and that's usually pretty common to see on someone's table.
Do you guys think it's...
Go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say, like, having a variety of different prices, like a pin or a book or a t-shirt or whatever it is, that people have a variety of ways in which they can just support you if they want to. And if maybe they don't want to spend $10 on one thing, maybe they just want to get a sticker and
Yeah.
support you in that way. So having a variety of different products or different prices, or I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if any of you, I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but do any of you have images of kind of work that you've taken to conferences, or images of your tables and kind of how you set them up that you could share with us?
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see. Actually, if someone else wants to go first, you can go ahead. My image isn't quite.
I think I can find some.
Yeah, Kyle, if you don't mind going first. I have all my photos, but they're like kind of not in any sort of organized fashion. I just threw them in a folder, and so I can like pull them up one by one.
Yeah, same.
Can we just drop them in the chat? Would that work?
Oh.
Or?
I have a photo I can just pop up here real quick.
Oh, thanks, Dennis.
Yeah. Here. Okay. So yeah, it's like, this is at Short Run. We also did very similar thing at TCAF here. So just like obviously like the table sizes can be different at different places, but it's not anything elaborate for what we've done. It's just like kind of getting your book to stand up in certain areas of your table, getting a variety of the things you have on there, and then yeah, but like you can kind of see that some other folks have a little more on their tables. So like you can like take advantage of the front of your table, have like book stands and little like ways to prop things up. Yeah, I mean, folks have really creative ways, but at some of these you don't really see a whole like really, really big displays or anything. So I don't know, I think that's good to know.
Yeah, I dropped a photo of one of my tables at Cake on Instagram in the chat. So it's pretty similar to what Dennis kind of showed. Some people will go all out and like print big banners, but I think for the most part, like a tablecloth, some really good like book stands or display stands are helpful. And then I think that's usually good.
Yeah.
Great.
I did not make my stand myself.
We have a question here too from Kate Gunther. Do you sell prints as well as zines at Zine Fests? And what price range do zines and prints generally go for? Is there a kind of a sweet spot in terms of the price range?
Yeah, I think you have to look at how much you've spent on the printing of the product, the print or the book or the zine, and then you maybe want to double what you spent. Something like that. Of course, you can't go too high, and then people won't buy it. Sometimes it takes a little trial and error to figure out what's the right price for something, but and and you can do prints or zines, but some shows have a little bit more of like they just want you to do zines, or they don't want too many other types of things. So it depends, but usually you can bring whatever the thing that you make.
Mm-hmm.
But and in terms of
the question,
what's that?
Did that answer the question?
We'll see. Also, just curious. Yes, it did answer the question. what about actually selling your work in terms of like how you sell it, point of sale? Are these mostly cash, or do you have like a Square on your phone, or how's that worked out for people?
I have a Square reader. It's helpful to have. Um, I also bring like a tin box with me for cash and change, because I think it's largely preferred amongst tablers that cash is like the thing that you ultimately want, because then you're not getting like weird fees taken out from like Square and stuff like that, or PayPal. Um, but yeah, I tend to have like a jar behind my table and then a Square card with like a little sign that says "We take Square" like right up front, so people know that they can bring their card out.
Yeah, like I remember at TCAF, there was an issue with the internet last year. So like for like half an hour or something, no one could pay with a card, or like no one could or could send like PayPal money. So it was a issue. Yeah, it was kind of hard. But yeah, so something to keep in mind. Yeah, like cash can be really good to have.
Yeah.
It's good. This is something we always forget about until the last minute, is you need to have change to make change for people that bring you like a 50 or something, and you got
I have forgotten change before.
yeah. But yeah, so that's a good thing to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Harry's also pointing out here that the Square Reader is free when you sign up, so that's great to know.
Yeah, they'll usually send you like the little white Square Reader thing that you can like plug into your phone, unless you have a phone like mine where you can't do that, then you have a dongle. But yeah, it is free, which is really helpful, and then they just like mail it to you, which is rad. Yeah.
That's great. Well, we have a few more questions here. While we're talking about getting paid here, one of the questions is, how do you record festival sales for taxes?
Well, we didn't make very many sales, but it's good to just in general, it's good to keep track of how much you've sold, your inventory, and your what your income is.
Yeah.
And if necessary, yeah, you have to pay taxes on it.
Do you file Schedule Cs?
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Do all that?
And then in that way too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can like write off like your travel fees and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And like your table fees as well. Yeah.
Great. Another question here: do festivals have guidelines for zines, proportions, number of pages? Have you ever run into this?
I don't think I have.
No.
Not necessarily. I think the most specific application I've seen as far as like giving your previews of comics work has been Cakes. I don't know if you two have like looked through it before, but Cake is really specific about showing comic work. Like the people who table there will show illustration too sometimes, but like they really prioritize the fact that they want to be like a show for cartoonists and for zines and comics. So be sure to like by that show, be sure to have like maybe like for each zine or comic book that you have like 2 or 3 pages online for you to like show on the application.
Great, thank you, Ryan. That's great advice. We lost you for just a second there, but I think we got the important part.
I know everything froze, but can you all hear me? I don't know what happened.
Now we can.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes. Ellen's also saying here, Fox Tax, or local tax firm in town that focus on creatives, has a good tax organizer for keeping your finances straight for taxes. So it's a good link. Also, just, we're talking a lot about sales here, but I'm under the understanding that a big part of why one would do a convention is to network. And so, can you talk a little bit about how that's worked for you and any tips or kind of best practices with that? What your objectives are, if there are some when you go? I'm sure there are probably some.
Sure. I guess,
Yeah, we try.
yeah, go ahead, Kyle. Yeah.
I was just to say we try to network at the. Sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's more difficult. I don't know what was your feeling on that?
Yeah. I think the networking aspect can be some of the best parts of doing these things, just because you get to meet folks who are, coming from all over. It can be really fun. Sometimes there's like events that the festival will put on that are, extra, and you get to, hang out with people. But I think what me and Kyle have done it's like you can always have stuff to trade with people. Looking for people who might want to collaborate on things or be included in the things that we're publishing. Yeah, I think that's mostly what I've gotten out of it, going there. And then maybe even sometimes there are people who are publishing things too, and just getting contacts with them. Yeah.
I think as a publisher, since we publish some anthologies, I've noticed that it's actually really great when people want to share their work with you and are interested in collaborating. And because I feel like on the other side of it, when I've wanted to approach a publisher, I was like, oh, I don't want to interrupt them. I don't want to put myself out there, be a pest or something. But it's like as a publisher, you're like excited to see that people are interested in what you're doing and they want to participate. So it's interesting to see it from that side of it.
Yeah, I would add to just like the simple act of having like a stack of business cards on your table is like really important. So people who are either like doing quick drive-bys or honestly just don't have the funds to purchase something from you can just grab like a card and either like have your name to promote or maybe buy something from you later, like online or at a different show. So yeah.
Can I echo that, Rye? I've been to several of the local cons, and I see artists who I would love to invite to do like a talk or something, and they're like, "Sorry, I don't have a card."
Oh yeah, or like another option that I've done is like if I honestly didn't have time to print cards or forgot, on like my like pricing list, which I usually have on my table, I'll just like have my name, my social, and my email, and I'll be like, oh, I don't have cards right now. You can take a photo of this though, and then more often than not, people totally do. So yeah.
That's great. And do you sort of drop by tables of publishers that you would want to be involved with and give them a copy of your work? Is that a method?
Well, I guess you would ask them what is their preferred process for submitting work or communicating with them, and then they go. Sometimes they, I guess, can't accept certain things for legal reasons, but they'll have a process by which you can submit work to them.
Yeah, I think too, if you're already tabling, the nice thing is that if you're just like giving off like a really good energy and like, like that sounds weird, but like a lot of the times a lot of people who are tabling will just like walk around to just like scope who's tabling, like, oh, I've seen your work before, I really like it. And honestly, like a show is really fun because it's just like a lot of other creators that are doing the same thing as you, and like less so trying to get into someone else's like, business. It's more just like, oh, I would love to just like be a connection with you and like follow you and you know, just show that you really admire them and their work. And that's usually like the best way to just network at a show, honestly, I think.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's like kind of the social aspect is just like really cool. So just being able to take advantage of that opportunity to be around those folks who are doing these same things, like you like really do that, like really talk to people. And yeah, like Rai, you said, it's not really getting into work with folks, but like like how maybe you can just create a new connection with somebody out here.
Yeah.
And have some of those connections that you've been able to make led to, you know, opportunities later that you were able to collaborate or work with people. That's great.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we got a couple questions here, but I'm curious. We've talked a lot about comics and zines, but not a whole lot about illustration. And in terms of illustration, you know, do you usually kind of sell prints of your work? Is that format? Do you have any, I guess, tips about that or things that you've experienced that would be kind of good to know?
Yeah, I would say if it's like illustration specific, you can either have like digital prints. Some people will go the extra mile to like do like screen prints or risograph prints because that makes it a little more tactile and like really kind of leans into the fact that you're in this like place selling physical work. Like I feel like digital prints do great, but if you can like kind of like turn up that notch like one more, people like want to buy that. And then I think often with like illustration fairs, coupling it with like shirts is pretty common, like apparel or again like knickknacks, like swag, like prints or not prints, like patches or pins is pretty common too. Yeah, there's the London Illustration Fair is really cool. I've been to it once. I did not table, but it's primarily for illustrators, but I would say everyone there were also selling zines. So there's like that big overlap. I'll drop the link in the chat, but it's really cool.
Great.
Yeah, I would say also just one thing that I always forget is if I'm selling a print or something, especially like a risograph print, like having a way to protect it and just like give it to somebody, like whether it's a bag or sleeve or something, can be really convenient for you know yourself and for the buyer. Yeah, because I've always just I've had just like sometimes rolled it up and it gets crumpled or something. So that it both looks better when you have like a package to give them, and it also keeps things fresh.
Yeah. One more note on that too is that like we kind of showed our like photos of our tables, but if you're gonna be like doing an illustration fair, I think a lot of people will have like an even taller like pegboard or something behind them where they can like stack illustrations, because those obviously take up a little more space, and oftentimes the amount of space that you have per table is like 6 feet or half of that, even like 3 feet. So in that way, like kind of investing in a display is really important. Yeah.
That's maybe a good segue into the question that's here in the chat, which is about buddying for conventions. Thinking about half of a table. The question is, since I know that makes tabling more affordable at times, but how does that change how you apply to some conventions, and how do you find someone to buddy with that not only you appreciate their work, but work well with as a person for breaks and such, and stylistic similarities?
Well, I mean, Dennis and I have been sort of doing that. We're showing together and both our own work and then work we've collaborated on. And a lot of times we have a 3-foot table space, and usually that's enough for the two of us. A lot of conventions, when you apply, will ask if you're going to have somebody sitting with you. They can be like your guest, or if you apply, you can say that you want to sit next to someone else that's also applying.
Has
I
that
think it helps.
any impact on, I don't know, getting accepted into, sort of like, well, if they want one person, then they'll, the other person kind of comes with them because they want to work together at the table?
I don't know.
I don't remember the show, but there have been some shows that have kind of started to like kind of crack down on that a little bit, of like, oh, this person got in and they're letting someone else also table on their table, which I don't personally think is a problem. I think if it's your table, you can have someone else's work on your table too. It's totally fine. But yeah, I think it's more of like perhaps a space thing. Having too many people behind tables and stuff like that, too much work. It's kind of harder to like list on a pamphlet who's really tabling and who isn't. But no, yeah, I've shared a 3-foot table before, and I thought it was great, honestly, because 3 feet doesn't seem like a lot on paper, but it actually kind of is. And to your point too, Kyle, on a lot of applications, it will ask if you're like a self-publisher or an individual, or if you're a publisher. And publishers tend to have like 6 feet tables because they have more books. Whereas if you're like a self-publisher or a individual creator, 3 feet is usually enough for maybe just you and like one other person.
Yeah, I think it occurs to me that the chair issue is also an issue, because they run out of chairs eventually, and they're like,
yeah,
you have to share this one.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that maybe. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm like reading the rest of that, the question in the chat. Even if you're not like sharing a table, you can, like Dennis said, indicate like who you want to sit by, because that's really helpful for like if you do need to take breaks, you can have someone like watch your table, or like if you trust them, manage your sales for like a second. And then also too, it kind of makes everything a little more fun also, because you get the table by a friend. But yeah, I think for the most part, I think a lot of shows are pretty smart about kind of clustering styles or content together so that they're not all similar, but everything's kind of in a zone that makes sense. I think TCAF does that. I haven't been in a long time though.
Yeah, they have like levels. Or last time we were able to go last year, and there were different levels. Like, so each floor had different content. So like maybe big publishers were at the bottom versus individual folks at the third. And then they actually also do like this thing called Zineland Terrace, which is like a zine.
Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah, so it's like a lot more like zine heavy in that area. It's like, but then the rest, I guess, is more maybe comics, publications and stuff like that. So yeah, they have a lot of variety at that show. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Harry had a question here about the difference between self-publishing and independent. We get the words right here. Difference between self-publisher and an individual creator.
When I said that, they're not different. I meant them as the same thing. Yeah. So like a self-publisher, or if you're like a bigger publisher, bigger publisher would have like a bigger table. But if it's just you, then you usually get like 3 feet. So yeah.
Just thinking about chairs and buddies and breaks. Anything that you wish you would have known, before you did your first convention, but have now learned, that would be wisdom to pass along. I can think of, a chair and a buddy to watch your stuff while you go to the bathroom, but.
Eat and
Yes.
drink water. Because it becomes like it truly becomes like once it becomes like noon or so, it'll get really busy and then like you will forget. And it depending on the show, it's like 2 days, like a Saturday and a Sunday, and that's a lot of time to be doing the thing that you're doing for a weekend. So yeah.
Yeah. I kind of wish I had started doing it sooner, because I hadn't really done it until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it can be a lot of fun, and Dennis and I have gotten the chance to go to Chicago, and we went to Toronto, and we've been able to visit these places and see the sights. And Dennis went to Seattle, and so it's fun, and it's kind of like what you have to do to be a professional.
And when did you sort of know you were ready to do it? Or were you doing it when you were an undergrad, or was it after grad school, or just sort of at a certain point when you had enough work?
Yeah, I didn't really do it until after grad school. I didn't really understand the whole process of how to do it, and didn't really think my work was ready, or any number of things. But I think you just have to jump in and do it. And you want to make sure that you, like I said, you don't want to go necessarily where you travel very far and you have to get a hotel room and you have to spend a lot of money. But eventually maybe you want to try that too, and expand your audience and meet people.
Yeah,
What do you think, Dennis?
well, something we were talking about, Kyle, is like how ready you feel like you need to be, and I think we just like you don't necessarily have to look super professional or like be super like prolific to be able to do these things. Like maybe like a zine fest or a local fest would be a great way to start, and it's a good way to just see how people react to your work, and try selling it for the first time. But yeah, like I think maybe you don't feel ready, but it's worth doing anyway.
Yeah. I would say too that cons and shows are also kind of a cool like personal benchmark to kind of like give you a goal to kind of make whatever you want to make, which is kind of fun because it's like, oh, I'm making this zine or I'm making this comic or this illustration or print for this show, and it kind of gives it that context, I guess, of like I wouldn't really do this otherwise, or it like kind of then gives it an audience a little bit, which is pretty cool. So I've definitely been able to make some work to put in my portfolio that's just like, oh, I made this for a zine fest, like, and it's still relevant and it shows off that like aspect of your work. So
Yeah, I would imagine it would be like a motivating factor in that sense, kind of like a painter having an exhibition. You've got to finish your work, and yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's exactly like that.
Well, we're kind of getting towards the end here, but we've been fielding questions the whole time. I think, but we can certainly open it up for more questions that people have. There's a specific question about enamel pin manufacturers. So if anyone has information about that, maybe you can type that into the chat here. And I do want to just call out, there were a couple comments that we didn't get to. One of them from Blake, important to point out that Twin Cities Zine Fest prioritizes newcomers, BIPOC, and LGBT people during their application process. Thank you, Blake, for pointing that out. And also Harry had said something about kid-friendly work versus maybe adult work, and how that gets organized in terms of space. Any experiences that people have had with that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know that Cake, and I think Autoptic did this too, where if you specify that you have children-friendly work, you can check that on your application, and they gave everyone like balloons to put by your table, which is kind of cool. So that kind of gives like an indicator. But I would say I've seen kids at Cake, and Cake's not necessarily like kids-only stuff, but I think parents kind of know that, and they're using their discretion. But yeah, there's often a way, either in the pamphlet or like a physical indicator on your table, to be like, I have kid-friendly stuff. It's cool for your kid to like flip through these things. Yeah, that's pretty common to see.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's then more the exception than the rule. So it's not that there's an adults only section, that there's a kids only section.
Yeah, pretty much.
Any other questions that people have that we haven't kind of covered? Oh, a couple comments here. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Dennis. List of fairs, excellent. And Aurora, researching pins for project. No, this is great that you're sharing this. Thank you. Cool video for tips about finding and working with manufacturers. Excellent. Thanks, Aurora. Anything else? Yeah, Ellen.
I just wanted to say we have one more alumnus who's really into enamel pins. If you wanted to reach out to her, Andy Fink.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I see Andy making pins all the time, so she might have some good tips.
Great. Thank you for that. Another comment here. Oh, thanks, Ellen. Any other questions or anything you feel like panelists that we didn't cover here? I'm so not well versed in comic conventions, and I'm just learning a lot here. But anything that you feel like we kind of should touch on that weren't maybe as part of the questions?
I just wanted to point out that Springboard for the Arts out here in St. Paul, they have this workshop series called Work of Art, and so one of the workshops is engaging customers and selling your work. So that might be of interest to folks. And then I think last winter they did a winter fair that was for like new merchants and people trying to figure out how to better sell their work, like tabling. So obviously this year this summer is not happening, but you look out for that coming up, because I think they'll probably do it again in the future.
Oh, great. Thanks for sharing. That's great advice. Yeah. I just put my name my email into the chat here. If anybody wants to get a transcript of this, I know we've talked a lot about a lot of different things that might not have made it into the chat necessarily. So we will get a copy of the chat, and we'll get we're recording this. So just email me if you're interested in that, or just put your email in the chat if you're comfortable doing that, and I'll be sure to just send it to you when it's available. But I just thought I'd put my email in there in case people didn't want to put theirs in there, and that's fine. Any other questions? We're about at time here, but I have a question actually. Maybe we can end on this, which is, do any of you have conventions coming up that you're maybe it's not a good question at this time. That you were planning on doing, or in the far future?
Yeah, we were, Dennis and I were just getting ready to go to Toronto. Well, we would be getting ready to go to Toronto. Because we applied, because as a publisher, we can go every year. We got in, and under a different situation, we would be getting ready to go. It's May 10th, I think.
Wow.
Or that weekend.
Mhm.
Are they making
They
any
do.
other kinds of accommodations or platforms for people who were planning on being involved?
I think
Yeah.
what they are sort of promoting people that were planning to be there through social media. I found this thing. I was doing some research today. It's called Corin Zine Club, and I just put it in the chat. It's just a site where they are uploading PDFs of zines and sharing them through that process. So.
And is that in response to the question about online conventions?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going off in this chat.
No, it's great.
I'm doing a lot.
No, it's great. And there's a question about LGBT and besides Queer Bazaar, other LGBT-oriented conventions, and it sounds like people are putting some resources in there for that question, so that's great. Thank you so much for participating. This is great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other final questions? We're at time here, so we can end, but
thanks everyone. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Maybe the panelists can just hang out for a second. And
Sure. Socials. We can drop that in a chat or like a follow-up email, or I don't know what works.
Oh yeah,
best.
why don't you go ahead and drop it in the chat? Then they'll have it for sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. I meant to ask you for your websites too, but I forgot.
A quick note just for first, thank you. It was so good. I'm so glad we have a recording of it too, because we get these questions all the time, and since I'm not like a real heavy comic illustrator person, it's so awesome that we've got it here. The other thing is just a quick note for Michael. Did Seth go over how to save the recording?
No. Went over
I thought you may have forgotten. So all you need to do is once you leave the meeting or end the meeting, a little pop-up will come up and it will say, do you want to convert or converting now or something? Say yes.
Say yes. Okay.
And then you'll be able to access it. And if you just want to either send me the file or link to it or something like that, I can put it on the YouTube page, or you can, or whatever's most convenient.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for saying that.
I was like, I don't want to lose it. It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to head out. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, panelists. It was nice to meet you all. I appreciate your willingness to kind of roll with this and be moderated by someone who knows nothing. So thanks for
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was good. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you. I know some of you look familiar. I've seen you around the MFA building, but look forward to seeing you at some point in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Awesome.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Cool.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
End the meeting for everyone.